As we look at Bostrom's sort of list of concerns, a list of things that need to be taken into account if we seriously engage with the idea of the singularity and its consequences, I think that there are a few points that really stand out, especially in the wake of reading Hans Jonas. The first thing I think is that conceptually we have the arrival of a super intelligence, or as he says, the arrival of advanced artificial intelligence, immediately brings with it two challenges or two consequences that have challenging aspects. One is, of course, that the development of a superintelligence would lead to technological progress, presumably in all fields of technology and science. The other is that perhaps with a superintelligence, because a superintelligence presupposes a true artificial intelligence, that we would have to take into consideration that we were dealing with what he calls an autonomous agent, something like a person. So on the one hand, we have the ethical challenge of tremendous and rapid progress in all fields of science and technology. And the other, perhaps the even more philosophically challenging notion of an artificial person. I think that both of these are the kind of things that the Jonas thesis really has in mind. The first has to do with just the obvious potential for cultural shock and social disorientation, to quote Kubrick's 2001, that would come with this technological progress. And I think Jonas would focus on, in this list here, this A through H list here, I think he would focus on certain ones. For instance, D, elimination of aging and disease. E, fine-grained control of human mood, emotion, and motivation. F, uploading, which is basically uploading minds. I think that those three would especially concern Jonas because they are all profound changes in human nature, some of which Jonas specifically mentions. For instance, D, if a super intelligence could make such progress in terms of medicine and understanding of our biology that it could eliminate aging and disease, then that might be the most profound change in the human species, history of the human species, because it would either make us immortal or just give us such extended lifespans. And really the elimination of aging, such a profound change in human experience of living a life. That right there, Jonas would say, that calls for tremendous humility in terms of trying to imagine what the effects of that would be. If I'm not mistaken, it's in the essay I gave you, The Burden and Blessing of Technology. It might be in another Jonas essay where he says we should never do that. We should never eliminate aging. Maybe disease. I don't know how you could separate the two, the elimination of aging and disease, because they are very closely related, of course. But Jonas thinks that would be a disastrous thing because it would so disrupt and change human culture that we would not want to do it. But that's his opinion. He also mentions something like E, fine-grained control of human mood, emotion, and motivation. Our ability to, again, not extend our lifespans, but to change human nature insofar as we change our psychology. This goes to the very root of our humanity, Jonas would say, and we should be very, very thoughtful, careful, and humble about any such radically profound interventions. Of course, again, that's only an opinion. Some would say that changing human mood, emotion, and motivation is exactly what we need, given our perilous state on this planet. Something about human emotion, just particularly, I mean, of concern to me is nationalism, tribalism, bigotry, xenophobia, racism, misogyny, homophobia, et cetera, et cetera. All these, just terrible, terrible things about human nature that have been so prominent in our world, and especially our political world. Um, Racism is a terrible, horrible thing, and it's very much a part, I would say, of the human psychology. And yeah, I'd love to see it eliminated. I'd love to see it eliminated in me, right? I think my idea is that most of us have racist tendencies, and they're terrible. So, from a utilitarian point of view, why not get rid of them? What causes more misery than hatred of other races or hatred of women? I mean, if you've been on the internet, there's plenty of that. Or hatred of foreigners, people who aren't from your country, or hatred of immigrants. I mean, these are terrible things that are causing all sorts of misery and suffering in our world. Why wouldn't we want to get rid of those things in ourselves? Make a better world. I think the utilitarian would say, go for it. So it's not as if there's not another side to Jonas. Of course, there's another side. Of course, there are good reasons maybe to make interventions in human nature, human biology, human psychology. But Jonas again says you've got to be careful here. You've got to be humble. You do not know what the unintended effects of this might be. And you're definitely crossing a line. If somebody has racist tendencies, the traditional way of addressing that is education, reasoning, trying to get somebody to recognize that it's wrong. That is our way of doing it. And if we were to have a technology that enabled us to get rid of these things sort of by snapping our fingers, that would be a huge change in how we address the faults of human nature. And again, the Jonas humility thesis would basically say we should hold off on that until we're really sure that we know the ramifications of doing it. Finally, this F, the uploading, neural uploading, that's a favorite of Singularity fans, because again, it promises a type of immortality. And we'll see in next week in David Chalmers' essay, I gave you the excerpt that focuses on that, where he basically says that uploading would be an inevitable thing were a superintelligence to emerge, because it would be necessary for us to survive in such a world. And yeah, I mean, I think that Jonas would focus on these things. That is, if the superintelligence did bring with it radical and rapid technological progress that would enable us to do these things to ourselves, then the time is now. The time is definitely now to think about them, to think through the ethics of them, to make perhaps decisions about them. Of course, the other tremendous novelty, of course, would be the emergence of an artificial person. As Bostrom says here, artificial intellects are potentially autonomous agents, which would mean persons, and that, say, if we were Kantians, we would necessarily have to recognize the artificial intelligence, in this case, the superintelligence, as having rights, as being a rational creature that we would have to treat with respect. That in itself would be a tremendous thing. And if you want to explore some of the speculations about this from 50, 60 years ago, take a look at Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, where that is really a tremendously important part of the theme that's developed in that film, which everyone should watch. Anyone who's interested in technology or film should watch that film, and probably all of Kubrick's films. But, that if we did create a true artificial intelligence, not much less a superintelligence, then we would be faced with a completely novel moral situation, just the kind of thing that, again, Jonas is preparing us for in that we would have created a tool, what is necessarily a tool or an instrument, a machine, but an entirely new machine, a machine that we had to treat morally. And that brings with it just tremendous, would be a tremendous thing were it ever to actually happen. And again, there's all sorts of very intelligent people like Noam Chomsky or John Searle, philosophers, linguists, who believe that this is a complete mistake, that it'll never happen, that for conceptual reasons, you cannot actually create an artificial intelligence. So we would never be faced with this. But there are others who are equally smart people who think that it's fully possible conceptually. But one of the things that Bostrom goes into immediately is that in dealing with a true artificial intelligence, we would have to be very cautious because we couldn't assume that that artificial intelligence was very much like us. As he says here, artificial intellects need not have human-like motives. That is, we might be anthropomorphizing when we think of how a artificial intelligence actually thought. And that's certainly what Kubrick was doing in 2001, where the HAL 9000 computer is very human-like, especially insofar as it is willing to kill to preserve its own life. That was a certain assumption that Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke's co-writer made about the artificial intelligence. It may or may not be true. And the truth is we don't know. Artificial intellects, Bostrom says, need not have human-like motives. Artificial intellects may not have human-like psyches. Right? We don't know what we would be dealing with. We would probably have to admit that we'd be dealing with a person of some sort. Again, under Kantian terms, a person rather than a thing, so one that would need to be treated with respect. But we would not know if it thought like us. We would not know its motives. We would not know what it wanted. We would not really know how it thought. It would be so new. So it would be an entirely novel situation, as he says here at the end of that section. For all these reasons, one should be wary of assuming that the emergence of superintelligence can be predicted by extrapolating the history of other technological breakthroughs. I mean, we have nothing else but the history of technology and science, philosophy, whatever, to use to imagine such a situation, but we have to admit that it may not be the way that we predict. It may be so utterly new and different that we wouldn't know how to deal with a true artificial, much less a superintelligence.